Does God exist? It's not a question we can answer in just a couple of minutes, but this is an introduction to this conversation, and my hope is that this gets you started in understanding the importance of this question. It's one that all of us ask in our lives at some point. In fact, a really wise man named Solomon said a few thousand years ago that eternity is written on man's heart, meaning we all wonder if there is something more, if there is something out there, and if there is meaning to this life. But here's the problem. Most of us, if we're honest, don't actually spend time answering this question of the existence of God for ourselves. We live our lives based on how we were brought up, or we choose a certain belief system to support the life we want to live. But how we are brought up and our personal moral code doesn't really have anything to do with what is actually the answer to this question of does God exist? But how we answer it, if we choose to honestly do so, does have enormous implications in our life. I love how 17th century physicist, philosopher, and mathematician Blaise Pascal says it. He says this, he says, God is or is not. Basically in life, there are really only two options. There's not a lot of in between here. God exists or he doesn't. There is a divine power in our universe or there is not. And then he goes on to describe our life in terms of a wager. It's almost like a bet in how we approach this question and decision about the existence of God. Essentially, when we face this question and we ask for ourselves, does God exist? We all make a bet or a wager on our lives on whether or not God does. But then at the end of this wager, describing this whole wager, he says, the true course is to not wager at all. In other words, it's easier. Life is easier if you don't bet. It's easier if you don't answer this question. Because when you do, when you answer it, it has uncomfortable consequences in our lives. We have to view our lives differently based on how we answer it. There are massive implications. The way we view people, the way we view value and purpose and meaning are all implications of how we answer this question. He goes on to describe it like this. He says, if God does exist, you gain all. The implications, it means you have purpose and meaning and value. But if you lose, well, you lose nothing. Your life is essentially the same as it was before you ever answered the question. Wager then, he concludes, he says, wager then, without hesitation, that he is. If God exists, that changes your life in an amazing way. If he doesn't exist, there really isn't any meaning or purpose anyway, so you didn't lose anything in the end. So Blaise says it's easier to just believe that God exists. To which you might go, if you're a rational person, okay, well that's not really a pursuit of truth. That's just choosing the most emotionally comfortable decision. And Blaise Pascal knows this, which is why he says next, he says, yes, that's true, but you must wager. It is not optional. You are embarked. You must ask and answer this question. Why? Because it isn't optional. You are embarked. You are already on the path to answering it just by having a pulse. Think about it like this. If I had a friend ask me, Jeremy, I'm thinking about taking a trip to Colorado. Do you want to go with me? I would say, well, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to go. Let me get back to you to confirm for sure. So I don't fully answer this question, yes or no. And over the course of a few months, this friend asks me, do you want to go? He comes to me and he asks me, do you want to go again? And I say, yes, I want to go, but I never confirm that I'm going then. And at some point, my friend is going to show up on my doorstep saying, hey, I'm packed. It's time to go. We're leaving today. It's now or never. Do you want to go? And at that point, I have to answer yes or no. Because if I still choose to not answer the question, my friend is going to leave. And by not answering, by staying, I have inadvertently chosen to answer no. The same is true in this question about the existence of God, and that is Blaise Pascal's point. We all have a decision to make. There are implications on both sides of the wager on the existence of God. Implications for my life today and my life to come. Many people won't make the decision because, again, it's just uncomfortable. But in choosing to not answer the question, One day when our time here on earth is up, your life will be your answer. And I think your life is too important. And this is too big of a question to choose not to honestly and objectively answer it. So Pascal wraps it up. He says this. He says, which will you choose then?